it is cliche, but it is 100% true that the best way to be interesting is to be interested. Welcome to the FlowScribe podcast, a show where we help you grow your clinic with practical tips for marketing, client support, and building treatment programs that you can passively use to turn your clients into raving fans and a referral army. Hey, this is Doc Yates. Welcome to the FlowScribe podcast, brought to you by FlowScribe.com. And today I want to talk about more about establishing yourself as an expert and someone who's very interesting. And this doesn't really involve you having to show off too much of your knowledge. It's 100% true that if you want to seem like an interesting person, and as a practitioner, you kind of have to have a little bit, like all through history. Think about medicine man, Chinese practitioners. There was always a little bit of an interesting element, almost like a little bit of an element of mystery. And I'm not saying you want to be like Houdini or something weird like that, but the alternative medicine system, there's always a little bit of an unknown for people who are not in the field. And that ability to seem more interesting is part of the intrigue that's going to make people want to tell more of their friends about you, especially because you're going to get results. So, but honestly, rather than, I remember reading about an old Chinese medicine book where they would talk about the practitioners would come in and then they would, draw a bunch of weird symbols on the floor and they would do all this stuff. And they knew just as well that had nothing to do with it, but it was to create an element of interest and intrigue in their clients to make them seem like, oh, I'm getting something really special here. Now what they do, because you can quote them any way you want, is they'll quote studies. It's the exact same thing. They'll quote some portion of a study and be like, well, actually, according to the study, blah, 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 blah. And there's so many studies out there that you can quote anything you want from any direction. And we've definitely seen that in the last few years. People were talking about the exact same problem and having completely opposite solutions and studies to back it up. It's all the same thing. It's kind of building this element of like expertise and interest behind the scenes. So that was a huge tangent compared to where I wanted to go with this. If you really want to be interesting though, be interested in your client, because most of the other practitioners they've worked with aren't. They're too wrapped up, just like every other person, that we're too wrapped up with being interested in ourselves. Be interested in them, because chances are they are interested in themselves, and by you being interesting in them, they will find you more interesting. They will find you to be more likable. They're going to find you to be more of an expert. So let's go through the steps. Number 1, active listening. Make sure that you are actively, not just staring blankly, that you're acknowledging things that they say, often kind of repeating things back so that they understood that you heard, showing that you're writing things down in your notes when something's important, lifting your eyebrows, showing interest, all of these things, active listening during the entire intake. The next thing is that when you do get some information, go deeper. So, let's say someone was talking about bloating as an example. Someone's like, yeah, I have issues with bloating. And they think that's the end. They think that's all you want to know. Then you're like, oh, perfect. Okay, so is it upper abdominal bloating or lower abdominal bloating? And they're like, oh, I guess it's lower. Okay, do you wake up with it, or does it get worse as the day goes on? Oh, I guess it gets worse as the day goes on. Is it affected by eating or not affected by eating? Oh, so you have whenever their questions is, and especially I'm assuming that I'm talking to experts out there, you have a direct line of questions to make them think and to gather more information. And this experts have direct lines of questions. They know what they're going to ask, and they know the reason why they're asking it. They're not out, in outer space and left field somewhere asking some questions. They're like, why are you asking that? That has nothing to do with what we were just talking about. Like, you have to make it so that the line that they can follow it, but you're going deeper than they're used to going. You're not going from like left field to right field and then out, completely out of the stadium. Everything's direct in order. First base, second base, third base. You have to do it that way, but just go deeper than they're used to, because most people aren't. They're like, oh, okay, yeah, you've got bloating. Yeah, you got some heartburn. Okay, boom, here's a proton pump inhibitor. That's not what they're looking for at this point. That's why they came to see you. So, deep inquiry so that you can get information and to make them think, and then have a direct line of questioning because you're an expert. Now, what you'd want to do, you want to think about it kind of like a crime drama. You know how in crime dramas, when it's 3/4 over, all of a sudden you're like, ooh, I get it. I put together the clues. Now I know the answer. If you're good, you should be able to ask the questions in a way that all of a sudden that the client starts seeing the picture. They're seeing the whole drama unfold too because of you, and you're not the one who's telling them what to think. If you can make it so that they are coming to the conclusions because of your questioning, sometimes you'd be shocked how much of a difference that can make. Just letting them all of a sudden draw these conclusions that they never really made the connection before, but because you've asked the right questions to take them deeper, all of a sudden they're putting 2 and 2 together in their head, so that all of a sudden when you end up saying the same thing that they were just thinking, they almost feel like they thought of it. And if they thought of it versus you telling them, guess what that means? It means that the solution now has way more value. When the idea comes from someone else versus you being told what to do, like if you come up with the idea versus someone else telling you the idea has more value when you think of it yourself. So if you ask the right questions so that the client can draw the conclusions without you telling them the conclusion, that's going to make them even more invested in the solution that you will provide. So remember, every case is kind of, you get to make like an interesting crime drama, which will make it more fun for you in practice, and it's going to make it a lot more enjoyable and a lot more likely that the client's going to basically be willing to do the steps involved that they need to do to get the results that they want to get, because they're the ones who figured it out. So remember, be interesting by being interested, active listening, deep inquiry, direct line of questions, and establish your questions in a way that enables the client to draw the conclusions in the end, which are then reinforced by you. Fairly simple, straightforward podcast to show today, but if you can implement this in your practice, it will make a big difference in the rapport that you will have and the amount of clients that you will have sticking with you for the long term. Hope this was helpful. Doc Yates, signing off. Thanks for tuning in to the FlowScribe podcast. To learn how FlowScribe can help build your clinic, go to flowscribe.com.